Do you want to learn more on how to put money to work in regenerative food and agriculture? Follow our video course via investinginregenerativeagriculture.com/course or in the links below. Now, on to the podcast. Join me for a discussion on advanced syntropic agroforestry and how to change the extractive commodity crops causing deforestation through working with large corporates. Welcome to another episode of Investing in Regenerative Agriculture, Investing as if the planet mattered, a podcast show where I talk to the pioneers in the regenerative food and agriculture space to learn more on how to put our money to work to regenerate soil, people, local communities and ecosystems while making an appropriate and fair return. Why my focus on soil and regeneration? Because so many of the pressing issues we face today have their roots in how we treat our land, grow our food and what we eat. And it's time that we as investors, big and small, and consumers start paying much more attention to the dirt/soil underneath our feet. In March last year, we launched our Patreon community to make it easy for fans to support our work. And so many of you have joined as a member. We've launched different types of benefits, exclusive content, Q&A webinars with former guests, Ask Me Anything sessions, plus so much more to come in the future. For more information on the different tiers, benefits and how to become a member, check patreon.com/regenerative agriculture or find the link below. Thank you. Today I'm joined by Felipe Villela, co-founder of reNature, working to regenerate nature through agroforestry. They work across the globe on crops like cacao, coffee, citrus fruits, white pepper, rubber, leather and cotton, together with large corporates like Veja. Welcome, Felipe.
Hi, Koen. How's everything?
I'm very good. I'm looking forward to a conversation on advanced agroforestry, corporates, nutrient density, trees, and everything in between.
Perfect. Awesome. No, that's great to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation, and looking forward also to share a bit more of reNature and our work with the mission of reaching the 1 million hectares by 2030 of regenerated land through regenerative agroforestry. And looking forward to where it's going to lead us, this conversation. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, so start with a question about you. What brings you to Amsterdam? Actually, you're based in Amsterdam, but a lot of the agroforestry work you're doing is around the globe. And what brings you to agroforestry?
Perfect. So first of all, I was raised in a family that has been working with 1,500 hectares large-scale organic citrus farming in Brazil. It was near São Paulo. So actually, my grandparent, he brought the lemon Thai tea species to Brazil. And then basically they started doing citrus farming for a long time, over 60 years. And I was always involved in agriculture, in organic agriculture. And since my family gave me the conditions and also the possibility to explore around the globe other farms, I went to Africa, I went to US, I went to Canada, and I saw there was a lot of challenges. And I came back to Brazil thinking, hey, I'm traveling all over the world. I don't even know my own country really well. So I decided to go to the Amazon, and I was amazed by the knowledge that the indigenous people inside the Amazon, they're, treating nature and making everything coming from the forest. And when I left the Amazon, I saw the massive deforestation for soybean, cattle ranching, and logging industries. And I was terrified by the way we are managing the natural resources in that region. And I thought, like, how deep can we go? I know we need to extract resources for commodity use for corporates, but how responsibly is actually being done? So I came back home and I felt like, okay, I went to dig and visit every single agroforestry, regenerative agriculture, organic agriculture, you can name all the names, farms that it can inspire me enough to see how we can actually make a transition in a global perspective.
But basically, there was a second trip around the world. But the first trip, when your family gave you the space to explore, did you visit the conventional chemical side of agriculture? Did you visit the organic side? Did you visit the regenerative side? What did you explore and why?
Yeah, very good question. I basically went to dig into all these conventional, traditional systems, but looking to like grains, but also looking to tropical, more like cocoa, coffee, especially mostly. And I visualized the differences between the conventional, organic, and beyond organic, kind of regenerative, more in line with agroforestry systems. And the type of agriculture my family has been always working was organic, but I saw that there was a lot of knowledge and science behind regenerative and agroforestry practices that I went deeper into it. And then I basically saw there was a lot of experts in the field, and especially in Brazil. And one of the main reasons because people in Brazil that have been doing this for over 60 years. And I was amazed by how much knowledge is there, but they don't have access to highly impactful projects that could be developed from their side.
So why is Brazil such a hotbed of agroforestry and regenerative agriculture development? And for people that don't know, definitely start Googling and start diving into it, because there's so much happening there. And the question is always, why there? And you're saying it's been doing for 60 years. So why in the last 60 years has so much been done on understanding these kind of systems involving very often trees?
Perfect. Yeah. Well, in Brazil, if you dig into the KPIs, is really on community development. So people there, they really work collaboratively to bring cooperatives that they can communicate and then exchange their learnings. And I think for being like a very kind of like a community type of culture there, things can disseminate easier than in other cultures, which is more individualistic, let's say. And in Brazil, the knowledge of the agroforestry has been done also mostly because 85% of Brazil's food security comes from smallholder farmers. And these farmers, they always have been, exchanging their experiences and learnings. And this have been something that really inspired the agroforestry and regenerative agriculture movement to spread faster. And I think in some other countries, it's still growing, but it hasn't been gone faster as in Brazil at the moment.
And so you did this second tour, you went very deep into regenerative ag and agroforestry, and then you decided to set up reNature. How did that come about?
Perfect. And so, I saw there was a lot of knowledge and experts in the field on the ground. I myself wanted to go very deep into the knowledge of it. But then I saw there was a really big gap between the dialogue of these experts with companies that it has in their supply chain like more than hundreds or thousands of farmers that are supplying them with their main commodities like coffee, palm oil, or soybean, or whatever. And I spotted like an opportunity to actually bring access of these experts to help these companies and corporates to do the transition to regenerative ag and agroforestry systems. And we decided to start reNature focusing on two major countries, Brazil, Indonesia, mainly because of the highest deforestation rate was going too fast. And then we kicked off in those two countries. And then from that on, we would be looking to other climates and also other countries. So that, the biggest source of inspiration for starting reNature was really how much deforestation was actually being caused by agriculture, and how knowledge of these experts in the field of regenerative ag and agroforestry is displaced and could be well incorporated into this corporate sustainability targets of offsetting their footprint.
Yeah, so basically you saw a lot of knowledge on the ground, and you saw a lot of willingness of corporates to do something, and maybe they even mentioned regenerative ag, or they mentioned their value chain, but as soon as they were dealing with thousands or hundreds of farmers, it became very, very difficult to manage that and to implement some of these systems at scale. So that's a great idea. It's a great approach. How do you get into these corporates? Because I think many people listening to this podcast would say, I would love to work with Timberland, or I would love to work with, name another huge company that has somehow food, fiber, and oil in their supply chain. How did you get into your first, take us on the journey, your first customer, your first corporate? How did that happen?
Yeah, so the first two ones that, as I mentioned, Brazil and Indonesia, was with Farm. It's a company from New York, and they work with regenerative fibers for the fashion industry. So we started like a cotton production in the Amazon, in Pará region, as a replacement for deforestation practices used for cassava flour. And then we would help these communities. It's 40 families that were making cassava flour from deforestation. And now they have a generation of income from the cotton and other natural fibers for the fashion industry. So it's a small company that now are kind of changing the fashion industry slowly and they were accelerated by Fashion for Good here in Amsterdam. And now they are also joining forces with Vision, and that's one of our potential partners also in the future, as you mentioned before. And then in Indonesia, we started with Verstegen, this Dutch company which works with spices, mainly pepper, onion, and turmeric and cinnamon. And then we're planting with them white pepper in Bunka Island. We started as a pilot of 1 hectare, where we call Model Farm. And then as soon as we showcase the impact metrics of the project in the ecosystem services perspective, but also in the social and economic, showing how much yields it could potentially reach, and then they finance the scalability of this project. And we started as a pilot model farm, and now as they obtain the results, they are willing to scale that throughout 500 farmers, which is very interesting to see that there's the willingness to also scale these opportunities of regenerative practices.
And is this approach of a model farm then basically showing to the corporate what could be done in agroforestry, because everybody hears about it, but it's probably difficult to imagine in my own supply chain, and then basically scaling? Is that the model I'm using model twice. Is that the model you're using, and why are you using that specific approach when it comes to big corporates that could maybe also do a lot more at once if they wanted to?
Yeah, no, indeed. Like most of our proposals, we focus on developing either a model farm or a model school. A model farm is one demonstration plot. It can vary from 1 hectare to 10 to 15 to 20, for example. And this corporate can obtain the results of the impact that it's causing in the food security element, and also the soil regeneration, carbon sequestration, and then also the economical viability of the design. And then we have the model school, which is basically as they obtain the results and they are secure of the scale of this model, then they can build an infrastructure to host farmers and their agronomists. So we can really give capacity building for them to upscale that model throughout their production units. And then the third layer goes beyond, which we haven't launched yet, but it's the transition package, where we are basically creating a toolbox of all the necessary steps for farmers to do the transition. So from seedlings and the materials and tools, and also financial support and the knowledge from regenerative ag to enable these farmers to go through this transition phase where we want to launch this year. Just going back to your question about the corporates, it's the ones you should have mentioned. We're talking to them like Timberland and Veja and Nespresso. What's interesting, that most of them, they are really like struggling with the climate and resilience within their crops. Like Nespresso, for instance, they have like 1,200 farmers, which are really decreasing their production of coffee in Brazil, mainly because of the high desertification happening in that region, and they really need to change fast the way coffee is being produced. So most of them, they come to us with mentioning their challenges, and I think now it's growing. Of course, there's a lot of challenges. Like I went to pitch in Adidas, for example, here in Holland, and they have such a huge supply chain that she doesn't even know that cotton was coming for their production units and for their clothes and everything. The woman even said, "Oh, you should talk to someone then in Bangkok, which is actually producing the cotton, because we really don't know what's going on there." So there is a huge gap in the supply chain, and most of sustainability efforts is going to the end of supply chain, like reusing, recycling, and not really looking to the root cause, which is the soil. So it's a big challenge to convince the stakeholders.
And just to paint a picture, because I think it's time we dive a bit deeper into agroforestry and tropical agroforestry or advanced agroforestry, what you're doing. Let's take the case of the coffee farmers. You're saying their big challenge is desertification and soil degeneration, basically. What would a regenerative agroforestry coffee system look like, and how would that compare to a non-regenerative one? And in this case, it's annoying that we're on a podcast and we cannot show any pictures, but so be as visual as possible. What would be the difference between a regenerative coffee system, coffee producing system, and a non-regenerative and extractive one?
Oh, that's very good. So the traditional coffee plantation is it's only coffee in rows where you pass with the machine and you can harvest them. You can pass and inject the pesticides, fertilizers. So it's basically a monoculture of coffee. And then the regenerative agroforestry coffee farm we do in Brazil, it's 10 hectares we already started, and then it's gonna reach 200 by 2022. It's basically rows of coffee that we planted, and we planted banana in the same rows so that it can provide shade in the beginning of the coffee growth. And then in the same rows, you also have peanuts to help also with nitrogen fixing, and also with providing another source of income for the farmer. And then in the other rows, between these rows of coffee, then you have African mahogany, and also you have macadamia. And so you can spread the diversity into like African mahogany to cut the wood from 3 to 5 years time, so that you can use for wood chips to fill in the rows of the coffee, to become as fast as possible independent from external inputs, and so that you can really use this as a biomass cover in the crops of coffee, and also provide shade through time. And the macadamia is an excellent revenue crop that it can give a lot of good source of income in the long term for the farmers. So we prospect each revenue streams and how long it will take to harvest each of these major species in the design, so that the farmer can distribute that along his market. Yes, for some farmers, it's like a logistic breakdown, but some farmers that are willing to adopt these practices, they can actually generate 2 times as profit as the conventional, and they can even having less trees of coffee in one piece of hectare, they can even have a higher yield of coffee than a conventional.
What about the yield? But coffee is a shade tree at the end, and produces better, seems to be producing better, at least in your examples, in a let's say more nurturing environment than it is a monoculture kept alive by a lot of spraying and a lot of praying probably. So the yields are as good and potentially even better just on the coffee case, which means that all the others are basically extra cash flow.
Exactly.
And maybe that's also one of the reasons why it's growing so fast in Brazil, because everything grows fast. But in these cases with trees and with these kind of crops, it seems to be that regen ag makes even more sense compared to highly mechanized grain, etc., where we're definitely, we don't have those same margins and the same possibilities to easily switch or to easily transition.
Exactly. Like, the reason why Minas Gerais in Brazil, in the Cerrado region, where now soybean took over, the reason why coffee started becoming less attractive business is because soybean has been expanded and subsidies for soybean has been growing from the government. And coffee, actually, now we are, bringing this economic value of it back, so that we can also create a good business proposition for farmers in that region, which is massively deforesting for soybean practices. So it's an interesting case where the coffee, yes, needs shade, the same with cacao, and it's still having less trees of coffee and cacao in the same amount of land, you can actually yield more. So those are 2 crops that has a very successful results. Of course, with other kind of crops, as you can know, with the grains, there's more challenging there.
And what do you see as the biggest barriers for, let's say, this advanced type of agroforestry with many different crops, many different cash flows, management, etc.? What are the biggest barriers for it to really take off if the potential and the margins and the profits and also the resilience is so much better for the farmer? What is holding it back to really spread fast, even faster in Brazil as it's doing now?
So basically, I think it's really like the mindset of like understanding that even having less trees of the major commodity the farmer is producing for the company and having other species will benefit their major commodity that they're selling to the company. So it's really about understanding that complexity can help them in the process to generate more revenues in the long term, and also ensure food security, because most of these farmers growing in monoculture fields, these crops, they buy industrialized food and then they get sick, they go to hospitals, their children are not motivated anymore to keep farming, and they move to cities. And I think the KPI of agroforestry is literally on the food security component, because they also can feed from their own farm, and also like decrease external input costs, which organic still relies on as well, from organic manure and conventional from agrochemicals. And that's the beauty of complexity. But of course, not all the farmers are willing to do the high complex systems. So we, as reNature, we design regenerative agroforestry systems based on also like how to adopt that to the reality of the farmer. So it's sometimes very simple systems with 2 to 4 species maybe, and then some will really complex with over 100. So really depends.
Wow, you did systems with over 100?
Yeah.
That's quite interesting. That's really pushing the boundaries of what we think as companion cropping. Yeah.
Indeed. Yeah.
Must look like a forest, basically, like a jungle.
Literally. And the best coffee of the year, this year, was announced, and then it's actually coming from a syntropic farm, which is extremely complex with over 200 species or something.
Wow. Yeah, I saw it on LinkedIn. I will try to make sure to link it below. I think you shared something on LinkedIn on that, which is, of course, an absolute fundamental piece. Like, it has to be good food. It has to be good coffee. It has to translate into quality, because otherwise the corporates or the niche players, the niche brands that are diving onto regen are not going to keep doing it. I mean, if it leads to, it's great if it leads to yield, better margins, etc. But if it doesn't translate into quality, we're not going to win this war. So it's great to see that it actually translates already into amazing coffee, and it's winning prizes.
Yeah, exactly.
Which helps the complexity helps with that, obviously.
Indeed. And of course, not everyone wants to adopt the complexity of the systems. But I think that as like, for example, with the soybean case in Brazil, there is a soybean farm being done there. Of course, was only soybean monoculture field. And now they are integrating only one more species. It's called Mombasa Grass. And this Mombasa Grass is a very thick and very like a deep root type of grass, which is very fast grown. And then they can slowly start reducing their input cost, and use as a cover crop to be more climate resilient soybean and have a more long-term soil fertility in the end. Only one more species allow these farmers to think, so if this Mombasa grass helped us, maybe another species can also help us. And they are already planting some African mahogany, but not in the same row, but a bit distant, to kind of also see what could be the role of African mahogany to help them. So it's, slowly from simplicity or to complexity, they can understand the process of the...
It's a slow journey, but once they're going on it, then it's very difficult to go back, and you basically continue to add. Because I've had discussions with people on cover crops, and they started with 2 or 3 types, and now they're going to 15 different types or 20, and basically keep saying it has to be more complex to fill all the gaps and to help them. And they are going to mixes, to amounts of, or diversity of mixes and complex mixes that they maybe 5 years ago thought were absolutely impossible. Like, why would you put so many? But they all have a role. And like, it's a continuous journey, which is great for, I think, us in the sector to see that farmers are really innovating there and really pushing the boundaries of things that we didn't know were possible.
Yeah, exactly.
And in terms of reNature as a company and on the investment side of things, so where are you as a company now? You've been around for a number of years. You are getting into a very interesting phase. You've worked with a number of very interesting companies. You're in negotiation with a whole group of others. Where would you say, it's the end of January 2020, where are you now, and where would you like to be, like, let's say in a year from now, if we would be talking?
Perfect. So basically, at the moment, we are at least having one model farm done for each major commodity which is causing deforestation globally. So we're looking to palm oil, cacao, coffee, cotton, timber, rubber, and also soybean, of course. And then we basically want to have a really proof of concept for economical feasibility of these designs. And then we aim at having a transition package which it can target thousands of farmers that are working this supply chain. So that we can really come with these transition packages to corporates and also impact investors and banks to give microloans for this transition to happen in a larger amount of farmers involved. So now we have enough data on at least 4 of these 8 target commodities we're looking to. The other 4, we still need to dig more research into it. And so we are already scaling the ones that we have get enough data, and the ones that we still have to work on, we're still in this pilot phase with like a soybean and grains mostly. And so, yeah, at the moment, our final goal is to really get this proof of this successful stories in a scale, and then still get more data on the ones that needs to be more robust so that we can scale that in the future as well.
And you're also looking to scale the company. You're 6 people now, and where would you be like at the end of this year? Or where would you like to be, obviously? Where would you like to be at the end of this year in terms of people and in terms of basically projects on the ground?
So we are now 6, as you said. Basically, we got the seed investment from Meraki with Fernando, which is your good friend. And
we will be in the podcast soon. I know you're listening, Fernando. We have to plan that.
Yeah. Nice, great. And then, then we're going for the next round also now. So the next round of investment we're looking is also for increasing staff, because mostly of our cost is really on staff, basically. So we want to expand for this year for 14 people, including more experts, including also fundraise managers, also like more banking background people, so that we can also having more experts in the financial side, because we are very good with implementing projects and also communicating them, marketing, but and measuring impact, but we're not very yet good enough with the having more like more financial background people, like coming from banking. And my dad comes from banking, so for us is for me it would be interesting to have more people inside reNature in that area.
Especially as you're going to the transition package towards the transition package in the different crops, it will be essential, obviously, to work on that. So you'll be mostly looking to scale the company to serve more of the customers you have, and then obviously to continue to collect data on the main deforestation causing crops that you don't have, if you don't feel comfortable that you have enough data yet.
Yeah.
And in general, if you would look at, let's say, the impact investing world, who you know quite well, you see it. I at least see a lot of interest in regenerative agriculture, in forestry, in agroforestry. What would you tell investors? What should they read? Where should they start? What should they dive into? What should they discover more when they want to make investments in the space, in the broadest scale of the word of regen ag? What would you advise them to do first?
Perfect, Koen. Just going quickly, like into a point, like because at the moment reNature, we have been receiving like many proposals from like farmers communities, around the globe, like from China to Hawaii. So we have received around like 50 to 60, but 85% of these proposals we have received of farmers saying, "Hey, can you guys help us?" It's mostly they don't have budget, so they expect us reNature to come with this. With the financial injection, and 15 only comes from these corporates like Verstegen, Farm, and Nespressos, that they have the financial already in place for reNature. So all this 85%, we're aiming at working with the blended finance instrument. So like bringing a letter of intention from a company like Veja, for instance, saying, "Hey, we are willing to buy the cotton and rubber coming from reNature agroforestry farms." And then we come with this letter to the impact investor to pay perhaps half of the investment, and then having another player to pay the other half. So you can co-finance these projects which doesn't have the budget in place. Some of them, they have ROI, some of them they don't. So it really depends. But going back to your question about the impact investors, what I would as give an insight of how we could play a role in this world. I think it's really about understanding also the knowledge that regenerative ag and agroforestry is not like an input-based agriculture. It's a knowledge-based agriculture. So that means that we are bringing the capabilities for farmers to become more resilient and more also independent from from resources. So that said, is really about understanding that the role of consultancy, of the expertise in this world of regenerative ag and agroforestry, it's a key role to play to advise corporates and companies to do the transition. And most of investors, they are really afraid of this world of consultancy and advice, but it is something that is extremely necessary at the moment of where we are in this transition from conventional to regenerative. And so that's one. And two is also to, see that there are companies like, Veja and that are willing to transition. And they come with these letters of intention to do transition. And they're already working with hundreds or even thousands of farmers that produce their major commodity. And you, as our impact investors, in this world of investment, could also look into opportunities to
can play a role there.
Yeah. So one is a project based, and one is also the role of consultancy work with the knowledge transfer.
And it's a follow-up question I'd like to ask. What if you would be the investor? Let's say you're in charge of an investment fund. So it's definitely on the investment side of things of $1 billion, which is an insane large amount. And I don't think any of us will be in charge of that anytime soon. But I think the space will attract a lot of finance in the next years. And we in the sector need to be ready to absorb that. We need to have the infrastructure, the ideas, and the mindset to deal with all those zeros, basically. So if you tomorrow morning would wake up and you're in charge of an investment fund this size, what would you do? How would you invest it? How would you spread it to the best of your knowledge, obviously, to look for both a financial, but definitely also an impact return?
Okay, so basically what we would do is that we would set up a one center of kind of like a university type of school type of for each continent, so that really the farmers they can get they can go there and learn from the regenerative ag practices. And with these schools, you can host not just people to learn, like farmers and communities and the practitioners, but also you can host potential partner corporates that they can outsource from the same cooperative of farmers. So what do I mean by that? For example, if Timberland needs cotton and Vision needs cotton, and they're both with the same intentions of bringing regenerative ag as a mainstream. So cotton can be very well designed with moringa, for instance. So if you have also a different company working with moringa, then you can collect this collaboration between different corporates into the same landscape design. So what do I mean by that? It's bringing the 17th SDG of Partnership for the Goals between corporates to get their major crops and commodities outsourcing from the same amount of landscape. So you can diversify them, and for making a design which makes sense for the species, and then outsource this for corporates. And they come to the center to exchange their needs as partners. And then the practitioners, farmers, and communities, they can collaborate with giving them their inputs of the learnings from these models. And I think this way we can really speed up the process of regeneration globally, because then we can really start making a more efficient use of landscape worldwide. And then these farmers, they can really get food secure and having more motivation to keep farming and restoring soil.
I think it's a very interesting approach. It made me think of, I think it's called the rotation, or he called it the rotation risotto that Dan Barber, chef Dan Barber made, because he was saying, I want to take all the other crops of the rotation, not just the grain that we of course take, but to keep the soil growing, you need X amount of other crops to have a rotation and to actually grow this very, very precious Dan Barber grain, etc., etc. So I'm not going to use the grain. I'm going to use all the other crops and make a risotto out of that, make a plate to celebrate the rotation. So we have to think in rotations and we have to think in whole landscapes. And that probably is more than just thinking in cotton or just thinking in moringa or just, because in this case, it's definitely 1+1 is much more than 2. And 1 plus, if you go to 200 different crops, you get very complicated, but very interesting. That's a very interesting approach. And if you could change one thing, so stepping down from your investor role, if you could change one thing overnight, so tomorrow morning we wake up and you have changed one thing in the food and ag space, what would it be?
Well, for me, like what I would particularly change in the food and agri world, it's how we dialogue with farmers. I think the way we're talking to them, it's still it's more like we're still bringing something for them instead of really like listening to them. And I think the role they have is extremely important to decide also in the design of the systems, because I have seen like a lot of like people on the ground thinking that it's the way it should be, like with the regenerative ag, like and experts, but it's really about like absorbing their knowledge also like to incorporate into design. Like for example, in Indonesia, we sat down with these farmers to understand what they would like to eat as well. And then we can incorporate that. They feel ownership of the land. So they can really be motivated like for all their life and with their children also to keep doing what they're doing. So the communication and the dialogue with farmers is something I would like to change.
I think it's an excellent answer. I don't think anybody mentioned it so far, which it's a crucial piece. We've had discussions about it in the podcast and outside the podcast of obviously our view towards farmers, that they happily are mining their soils and they should know better and they should do this and they should do that and they should do et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. At the end of the day, they're working extremely hard in the current system, which we all created and we should all take ownership for. And getting out of this mess definitely requires partnering with farmers and sitting down with farmers and actually having a discussion why and how and what could happen, instead of coming with your rule book of, okay, I would like this amount of commodity crops compared with this commodity, or this is how regen ag should look like, and you should do it, which is a very easy trap to fall into. But I think it's extremely dangerous because it has happened more than enough, and it's a big part of the reason we're in this mess. So it's I really like the answer. And what do you believe to be true about regen ag that others also in and outside the space don't believe to be true? And this question comes from John Kemp, who often asks it in a slightly different way in his podcast.
Well, my idea to be true is that trees doesn't always need to be in the design of the regenerative ag, but it would be better. I'm not saying it has to be, because sometimes the farmer, as I said, like it doesn't want. But like it always improve soil fertility, soil regeneration, soil carbon stock in every level you can imagine. Like trees really have a role to play in the designing of landscapes. And not every landscape, I mean, but like most of landscapes, they really would appreciate to have a tree that it has can fulfill the needs, because when you talk about tree, people think they think of like just random trees, but that there is trees that really have a fulfilling role to design within any kind of crop that you can imagine. So I think it's really about what to plant and where, and then we can talk if it's going to be a tree or if it's going to be a grass. But it's really about the importance of understanding the role of trees in the design of regenerative ag.
And I feel like, but I don't know if I'm wrong here, that it's much easier in a country like Brazil or a country like Indonesia, where trees have always been, or until very recently, part of the landscape. But if you, and this is one of my final questions, I always say that I never do it, but if you move like the agroforestry discussion to more temperate climates, where our idea of trees, let's say in Western Europe, is in a forest or in a park, and the idea of agriculture is neat rows of grain or neat rows of soy and very neat rows of commodity crops, what do you see happening in agroforestry outside the more tropical areas, and what excites you there in terms of, because you have put your company in Amsterdam for a reason and not in Brazil or in Indonesia. So what do you see the potential in, let's say, Europe, America, Australia in terms of advanced agroforestry?
Well, basically, trees have always been in every kind of climate, right? So of course, like you see, like that trees that has always a role to play. And most of these monoculture crops that you have here in temperate climates used to be some forests. So like when you want to design these kind of crops that it has been designing here, like mostly for livestock, grains, you can always use trees to boost the soil regeneration process with pruning techniques and stuff like that. But it really depends. Like, so we use a lot of willows, for example, here in the temperate climates, which is very good, like to also as a water resilient kind of role in it for the soil. And it also grows really fast, so you can use the branches also to for wood chips and then in the ground to cover crops. And I think there's a lot of designs being done in Greece with Mazi farm people, also in Spain with the La Loma Viva and also with Patrick Wormers from European Agroforestry Federation work being done across Europe. So I think there's some good cases in temperate climates that it needs to grow, of course. I think the EURAF has a goal to reach 50 farmers adopting agroforestry by 2025, which is very ambitious, and I like that.
Doesn't sound very ambitious. 50, right? That doesn't sound very ambitious.
True. But it's
in the next 5 years. That's 10 a year. Anyway, I'm not. We'll get them on the podcast and explain why that's more than ambitious. But do you see like the exciting things like happening in Brazil with 200 different types? Is that something that, like the very complex version, is that coming to, let's say, Europe yet, or that's still something we need to wait for?
So that's the thing, like there is very complex systems here in Europe, but they become more like a niche kind of like agroforestry for restaurants or for small plots. Like in scale, I don't see complexity having a role in it. I see more simplified systems, as the Patrick Worms have been also working with.
Sorry, you don't see a role for it, or you don't see it yet, but it could potentially, complexity could play a role in the future.
Could, but it's going to take longer. And it really relies on the expectations from the farmers. So we as reNature have a questionnaire for farmers, and they can respond and how would they like to see their farm in the future. And then they can really kind of like give estimation for us how complex, how simple they would like. So, but I think it will take time, like for that to kick off in a complexity wise in Europe and in temperate climates. But it's going to get there slowly. And I think it's a process of the simplifying the systems, which is more aesthetic, attractive for farmers to start adopting, and then you can get to the complexity in the future.
A bit like the soy farm you mentioned, that is putting in one extra grass, actually one extra crop, and then now starts thinking about trees, and then slowly goes to more complex. Also because a lot of times the margins are very thin here. People are on extreme stress. So the risks, if let's say your farmland, the Netherlands now is extremely expensive. The risks you're running by introducing even one extra crop are enormous, and they're very, very close to the edge constantly. So it's very understandable. They're very risk averse.
But also, another point that I thought of, like, is because of the ecosystem services that you can actually abstract from more complex systems, it's higher. If the laws and regulations on the EU level can actually start giving credits to these ecosystem services faster than in emergent countries, it means that the complex systems can go faster here as well. So it can help to accelerate the process.
Yeah, definitely. It can speed up the process, absolutely. I want to thank you so much, Felipe, for your time and a fascinating insight in how to work with corporates, advanced agroforestry, complexity, And I don't think it's the last time we chat, but thank you for this first one. And I'm looking forward to checking in how the growth and the scale up and all the model farms are going.
Perfect, Koen. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a really big pleasure to be here. I have been hearing about your podcast for a long time. And people also, like yesterday, last week, we got together with Thijs from ABN, and he's also a big fan of your work. And it's really nice that now I have been invited. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining. And thank you for your work.
Have a nice day.
Thanks. If you found the Investing in Regenerative Agriculture and Food podcast valuable, there are a few simple ways you can use to support it. Number 1, rate and review the podcast on your podcast app. That's the best way for other listeners to find the podcast, and it only takes a few seconds. Number 2, share this podcast on social media or email it to your friends and colleagues. Number 3, if this podcast has been of value to you and if you have the means, please join my Patreon community to help grow this platform and allow me to take it further. You can find all the details on patreon.com/regenerative agriculture or in the description below. Thank you so much and see you at the next podcast. Dear friends of the podcast, I'm super excited to share with you the online video course Investing in Regenerative Agriculture and Food. How to put money to work in regenerating soils at scale and growing a lot of tasty food while doing it. Why are we doing this course? After 100 interviews and more than 100 hours of audio asking the question how to put money to work in regenerating soils, and have been following the space since 2011 and recording this podcast since 2016, we thought it was time to share our lessons learned. What have we seen in the space over the last years? How have we built our decision-making framework? What to focus on with the podcast? How have we picked interviewees? And what questions should you ask? What is happening in the space? What should you read? What should you listen? What should you watch? How to approach this space? For whom is this course? You, the soil builders and investors in this space. The soil builders, people working in this space, entrepreneurial farmers, fund managers, vehicle builders, crowd investing, platform builders, agtech companies, farm-to-gut food companies, permaculture, keyline designers, holistic management consultants, etc., etc. People that are building soil at scale. And the investors who are putting their own money to work through their family office or as private individuals, or people who are putting other people's money to work through foundations, institutional capital, banks, insurance companies, etc. Is this course free? No. This is pay what you think it's worth. Meaning, I have no way of knowing what this course will be worth to you. And I'm very aware that among the listeners of this podcast, we have people with very different means. So I'm inviting you, if this course is creating value to you, and if you have the means, to consider paying what you think it's worth. Thank you. So what is this course? It's currently a series of 17 videos, mostly ranging from 10 to 15 minutes, plus PDF slides, so you don't have to ride along. We're gonna look into why invest in regenerative agriculture and why extractive agriculture is so risky, how to invest, what kind of frameworks you could and I think should build, what to invest in, what kind of co-investors you could find, or what kind of investors you could find if you're a soil builder. Every lesson will have a digging deeper part where I will share what kind of reports, what kind of interviews, what kind of videos you can look into if you want to dig deeper. We're going to look at nutrient density, landscape design, and a lot more. So what is it not? It's not a list of investable deals. Unfortunately, that doesn't exist in this world. We're really at the beginning of the regenerative agriculture and food revolution. It's also not investment advice. Before making any investment, please find professional investment advice. So get ready, get a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, or whatever you're drinking. Click on the link below, sign up, and I'm really looking forward to your feedback.